Thank you. I'm so glad you're here, and here under the wire. Yay. Love you, Lou.
Thank you. I'm working like bookends as far as my time goes, so I'm thrilled that I can, get here in time as it is.
Okay, so before we push the button, David, you're going to push the button. Lou's going to start. Then, David, you're going to be the presiding officer to get the ball rolling, and then I'm going to carry on. And with that, we're not too late. It's only 7:46. Not so bad.
Did you hit record?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, very good. Welcome, fellow Toastmasters and guests. This meeting of online presenters has now begun. For the benefit of our guests, if there are any, I'm not sure if I see any here, please note that in order to be a member of our club, you must be a current active member of Toastmasters International and have completed at least 6 speeches, or you must have sufficient relevant experience in video presentations, for example, facilitating online webinars. If you have not already done so, please change your panel to ensure it shows your name and role if you have one. Right-click and select Rename to do so. We have members and oftentimes guests from many countries around the world. Thus, as a professional organization, we ask that you please be aware of language or word usage that may be considered offensive or otherwise insensitive due to cultural differences. Please note that we are recording this meeting. Your video and audio contributions may be used for club marketing purposes. Also, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Today's theme is Treasure of the Holidays. Please welcome our presiding officer, David Carr.
Thank you, Lou. Lou, I think you covered it. We've got everybody here. We know each other. We don't need to introduce too much. You told people that they're being recorded. All their sins will be held against them. And so I think I should turn the meeting over to, did Elaine disappear? Our Toastmaster of the day may have gone missing for a moment. Let's hope that is a momentary thing. Now I'm not quite sure what to do, because I don't think I don't know whether we want to just start on speeches. I suppose we can.
Let's go ahead and then introduce the roles. How's that?
As general evaluator, I can introduce the roles if you like.
There you go. All right.
Works.
All right. We have a number of roles that are required for a Toastmasters meeting to function, and many of these are thankless tasks, so I'm going to thank you up front for doing this. Yay, thank you. Let's introduce our various participants and see what they will be doing. First up, our timer, Tim Gould. How are you going to indicate timing today?
I will be using my fancy-dancy timing information here. I have a timer in front of me, and depending on the speech, I will flash a green light, and then a yellow light, and then a red light when it's time to be up, and then we'll see what happens after that.
Excellent, excellent. And they were very illuminating, I might say. Now, I must admit that I didn't jot down who was going to be the R counter. So who volunteered to take on that role? Was that who
That's
wants
Joy.
to be the Wizard of R?
Joy.
That's Joy. Indeed, I can see it down next to your name. Joy, tell us how you're going to be doing this job. You're still muted, by the way. Joy, you're still muted.
Yeah, I would be listening all kinds of bad habits. Some of us have, like repeating a word basically, or and then all kinds of unnecessary utterances that are not even words, like and and then in the end of the meeting I will report about that. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Joy. Now, Tiger, despite what it says, is not in fact grammar, but he is doing grammar. So, hello, Graham Tiger, if you'd like to tell us what you'll be looking for as grammarian.
Well, at the very least, I'm not the grammarian cop. So my role here is to pick out exceptional. I apologize for my video. For some reason, I'm in delayed mode here. However, my role here is to pick out exceptional English and also look for egregious uses of the language. Thank you.
And we shall try to avoid the egregious errors. Thank you for that, Mr. Grammarian. Our watcher, the roll was open, but I believe Chris has stepped into that role. Is that correct? No.
Yes.
Well, I know that Chris is going to be our chat monitor, so she can tell us about that.
Yes, you're talking this Chris, right?
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry, Chris Gould. Sorry.
Yes, I did end up being both chat monitor and watcher. So for chat monitor, I'll just make sure that at least I am reading all, and if there's something that everybody needs to know, I'll jump in and say so, and I'll give a little report at the end how it went. And I will be watching for how people show up visually as opposed to vocally on this meeting, and give you a report at the end for that.
Excellent. My wife is, thank you. My wife is just closing the window because my next door neighbour has just started up a lawnmower. The joys of being here at 11 o'clock in the morning. Norman, it's not 11 o'clock in the morning where you are, I can tell, because the illumination behind you suggests that it is in fact evening. Tell us what you will be doing as vote counter.
Okay, I'll be counting the votes for the best speaker, the best evaluator, and the best table topic speaker. And then give me a report at the end. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Excellent, and I thank you for that. I thank everybody for stepping up to those roles, in many cases as volunteers at the last moment, or perhaps you were voluntold, but that doesn't matter, you're doing the role, and that's what really counts. I still don't see our Toastmaster,
Okay.
so...
I will carry forward for the moment, and
all yours.
Presumably she will rematerialize momentarily, but until then, we do have 3 people lined up to speak this evening. I'm going to start with Christian, because he's first on the agenda, even though I don't know too much about what he's going to tell us, except that it's storytelling, it's a folk tale, and his title is The Woman in White. Christian, you're on.
In 1968, Mauritius experienced communal conflict between Christians Creole and Muslims. The result was a 10-day riot around the city, now known as the 1968 riots. During that 10-day period, the official death toll was 25. Unofficially, it was easily 4 times that figure, 4 times. People from one community would just barge into the house of the other community, grab the family members, slaughter them, and then make them disappear. And one of those areas where people would be buried, yes, literally buried, was at the foot of the city's citadel. The citadel stood 240 feet above sea level. During the day, it was a pleasure for the eye. At night, it was a looming construct of disaster and fear and fright. And this is where our story begins. A year after the 1968 riots, a few people who would get drunk at a local tavern would talk about this lady in white who would be roaming at the foot of the citadel. She would be carrying a petrol lantern and would look for any deceitful, revengeful soul to grab and take with her to the other side. Whether that was a discouragement for people to go in the citadel or out at night, especially after the riots, or just a tall tale that drunk people made at the tavern. Who knew? Well, 2 young men decided to find out. They got this dare from the lady friends to go and spend 1 whole night at the doors of the citadel. And they took on the dare because the price at the end, if they succeeded to spend the night and come out alive, was a weekend with their ladies. And this is proof that young men often do not think with their heads. So Jacques and Georges, we'll use these names for the story, set out at 10 in the evening from their houses. They were located just outside the city center, and they had to walk. And all they had with them as they set out was a bare ration bag of food and drinks, and each of them holding their petrol lantern. Now, the mood was right, the mood was sound, the mood was mighty as they walked and did small talk. They were both young 20-year-old, well-built men in the prime of their lives, and they had nothing to fear, and they had this whole amazing weekend to look for if they could spend the night alone at the foot of the citadel. As they walked, the small talk was all about, I'm going to do this with my young lady. Oh no, I'm going to take her to the seaside. And it was on and on and on. The lady in white was just forgotten. It was completely out of their mind. At just before midnight, they reached the doors of the citadel. They hadn't noticed the lonely lane up the hill in the dark, lighted by only the light of the moon, as it had trudged onto the doors. Yes, the full moon was out. And the man at the tavern would usually would usually say that the lady in white comes out when there's a full moon. They hadn't noticed all of those things. So just before midnight, they had grown famished. They decided to use part of their ration, light a fire, do some small talk again about their lovely ladies. And they sat down and did so. As time went by and the chit-chat went into a drool, they fell asleep next to each other at the doors of the citadel. A few times afterwards, Georges just woke up from his slumber. Not his slumber, just woke up with a shock. He felt that something had just walked in front of him. He didn't know what. He felt a presence around him. He didn't know what it was. He thought it was Jacques. He looked around. Jacques? Jacques? He thought Jacques had gone up and replied to the call of Mother Nature. Georges stood up, picked up his lantern, looked around. Jacques! Hey man, where are you? Jacques! Don't play games with me. Come out here. Slowly, the solid, calm hand of fear gripped the body of Georges, and he realized at around 3 in the morning, yes, that was the time his watch showed, he was all alone at the doors of the citadel under the moonlight. And fear, blind, no logical fear just grabbed him. Georges started to shake. He looked around. He forgot about the ladies. He forgot about Jacques. He thought only of himself, his survival. And he said to himself, to hell with this, I'm going home now. As he grabbed his petrol lantern and slowly made his way carefully down the hill. He saw something at the corner of his eye. He turned, and there she was, the lady in white, walking slowly towards him, dragging what seemed like the lifeless body of his friend Jacques. Georges felt like he just became old within seconds. He let go of his lantern, which broke down. All light was out except for the moonlight. He opened his mouth to... Nothing came out. His heart was racing and he was frozen. And he just did the only thing that came to him. Knelt down, closed his eye, and started praying, Lord, Lord, Jesus, help me, help me, help me. I'm not going to think about girls. I'm not thinking about girls. I'm not going to think about girls. And he just stayed like this. He did not see time go by. Just stayed like this until it was all quiet. He opened his eye, saw no one. Lord, please, please, thank you, Lord. Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me. And he just went into a cocoon and slept there until daylight. When the sun came out, George just woke up, rushed down the citadel, went into his house. He had no idea how he got into his room and just crawled into bed. To this date, George, who now lives in a home, still tells the story, and no one believes him. No one found Jacques because they thought Jacques had disappeared, had left the country. And by the way, George had lost all of his black hair when he came down the hill. The word there, my friends, is never go out alone at night. And even if you come across, as you travel in the middle of the night, if you meet the lady in white, never stop and never think about bad things. Otherwise, she will take you away just like she took Jacques. Madam Toastmaster.
I'm glad that the power returned and I could return with a little luminosity in back of me to also appreciate Christian and a story that had these elements of darkness and light and the luminous moon and the light of the day and these beautiful contrasts. So thank you, Christian. And hello to replay viewers, Toastmasters who are gathered here, and everyone who has taken on a role for the day. I appreciate your help. You are merry, merry elves. Right now, it's time for us to move on to speaker number 2, which is our international director and distinguished Toastmaster, Carol Prahinsky. She has for us a monodrama titled No Friend But the Mountains. And so in this presentation, she's going to be assuming the identity of a character and portraying the physical and emotional aspects of this character. So we're going to feel into that. This is the interpretive reading from Chapter 1 of No Friend But the Mountain by Behrouz Bouchani. Some parts of this reading might be a little disturbing. She apologizes if you find the reading upsetting. In this autobiographical story, a Kurdish-Iranian refugee attempts to reach Australia. He describes his journey in a mix of poetry and prose that he tapped out on a mobile phone in Farsi, no less. Carol Prahinsky.
Under moonlight, an unknown route, a sky the color of intense anxiety. 2 trucks carry scared and restless passengers down a winding, rocky labyrinth. They speed along a road surrounded by jungle, the exhaust emitting frightening roars. The looming shadow of fear sharpens our instincts. The branches over us sometimes cover the sky, sometimes reveals it as we speed past. I'm not sure exactly which route we're taking, but I guess that the boat we're supposed to board for Australia is in the distant shore in southern Indonesia, somewhere near Jakarta. In the last 3 months, I was in Jakarta's Kalibati city and on Kendari's island. I would regularly hear news that the boats had sunk. But one always thinks that such fatal incidences only befall others. It's hard to believe you may face death. One imagines one's own death differently to the death of others. I can't imagine it. Could it be that these trucks traveling in convoy, rushing towards the ocean, are carriers of death? No, surely not while they carry children. How is it possible? Who could we drown in the ocean? I am convinced that my own death will be different. It will take place in a more tranquil setting. I think about the other boats that have recently descended into the depths of the sea. Didn't those boats also carry kids? Weren't the people who drowned just like me? Moments like these awaken a kind of metaphysical power within, and the realities of mortality disappear from one's thoughts. No, it can't be that I should submit to death so easily. I'm destined to die in the future distance, not by drowning or any similar fate. I'm destined to die in a particular way when I choose. Death must be a matter of choice. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to give up my life so easily. Death is inevitable. We all know this. Just another part of life. But I don't want to succumb to the inevitability of death, especially somewhere so far from my motherland. I don't want to die out there, surrounded by water and more water. I always felt I would die in the place I was born, where I was raised, where I have spent my whole life till now. It's impossible to imagine dying 1,000 kilometers away from our land of our roots. What a terrible, miserable way to die. A sheer injustice. An injustice that seems to me completely arbitrary. No, of course I don't expect it will happen to me. A young man and his girlfriend, Azeda, they're riding in the first truck. They are accompanied by our mutual acquaintance, the blue-eyed boy. All three of them harbor painful memories of life that they have left behind in Iran. When the trucks collected us from the place where we were staying, the two men tossed their luggage in the back of the truck and climbed aboard like soldiers. For the whole 3 months that we were in Indonesia, they have been a step ahead of us other refugees, like finding a room, acquiring food, or traveling to the airport. This efficient trait, however, always resulted in some kind of disadvantage. On one occasion, when we had to fly to Kandari, they traveled ahead of everyone else to the airport. But when they arrived, the officers confiscated their passports. They missed the flight and were left wandering the streets of Jakarta for days, reduced to begging for food in the alleys and back streets. Now, guess what? They're in front again, driving at lightning speed, traveling at the head of the pack, slicing through the strong winds. The truck's exhaust roar as they travel towards the ocean. I know the blue-eyed boy carries an old fear in his heart from back in Kyrgyzstan. While in the Baladi city during the nights, confined to the town's apartment blocks, we would smoke on the tiny balconies and talk about our thoughts regarding the upcoming journey. He confessed his fear of the ocean. His older brother's life had been taken by a raging river. One hot summer day in his childhood, the blue-eyed boy accompanies his older brother to the fishing nets they had cast the previous night in the deepest part of the river. His brother dives deep into the water like a heavy stone dropping into the river. His body pierces the water, an unexpected wave comes through, and in its wake, just moments later, only a hand remains visible, reaching to the blue-eyed boy for help. Still a small child, the blue-eyed boy is incapable of grabbing his brother's hand. He can only cry and cry his cries for hours, hoping that his brother will surface, but he's gone. 2 days later, they retrieve his body from the river by playing a traditional message-bearing drum, the dole. The sound of the dole persuades the river to give back a waterlogged corpse, a musical relationship between death and nature. The blue-eyed boy carries his old morbid memory with him on this trip. He fears the water intensely, yet tonight he speeds in the direction of the ocean to embark on a journey of enormous magnitude, an ominous journey indeed, underpinned by this old and immense terror. The trucks race on through the dense jungle, disrupting the silence of the night. After sitting on a wooden floor for the trucks for hours, the weariness is obvious on everyone's face. No one utters a sound. The Sri Lankan baby silently clings to its mother's breast, gazing but not feeding. The slightest sound or cry could ruin everything. 3 months of wandering, displaced and hungry in Jakarta and Kendari. Everything depends on silence. This final phase. On the beach. My life during these 3 months have been mainly fear, stress, starvation, and displacement. Those 3 volatile months have now accumulated in this paralyzing moment of when a child screams. It could take us back to our journey's beginning. The blue-eyed boy and his friend are, as ever, ahead of everyone. They wait on the shore, the backpacks beside them. The smugglers rush us. The sound of the waves from the roaring ocean muffles other noises. Madam Toastmaster.
How amazing it is to hear that story, Carol. Those journeys that immigrants take into new lands to escape something difficult, to go through difficulty as they make their journey, seeking something brighter, something brighter. Thank you for that riveting story. Thank you. And next we have our third speaker of the day, Christopher Hulse. Christopher Hulse is also telling us a story, an entertaining speech, this one is called. The title is Artificial Light from a Star. Guess what? Chris is doing his 34th Toastmasters speech today in pursuit of his legacy, DTM. The speech project is called The Entertaining Speech, and Chris is prepared to entertain us in the 5 to 7 minute talk. It's going to be a personal experience that we are hearing about. Let's welcome Christopher Hulse.
Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Once upon a time, I lived in La La Land, better known as Los Angeles, California. It really is just another city, just like all the cities on our planet. The city's just different because there happens to be more stars than other cities. But stars, they're just people, just like you and me. They might think they're better than other people, but they're not. Really, more people just happen to know who they are because of what they do for a living. So when I lived out in Los Angeles, I got to become friends with an older comedian who you might have heard of. Her name was Phyllis Diller. Hopefully you do know her, but if you don't, you might know her for her infamous laugh. Here's actually a soundbite of her signature laugh that I captured at a party I was at.
What country is she from?
When I got the chance to be invited inside of her mansion, I figured it was pretty special because it was probably only going to be the only chance I got to be in a star's home. So I wanted to take it in with all my senses. Today I'm going to paint you a picture of what it was like to be allowed to roam free in Phyllis Diller's mansion. Yes, I said roam free. You walk in and the walls are covered with pictures. Almost every wall of every room was covered with something in a frame, whether it was art or a painting, something signed, or something unusual. Almost all her wall space was covered by something. And normally when there are pictures of people, when you're in someone's home, you see pictures of them at the beach, toes in the sand, arms around their loved ones. But in Phyllis's pictures, they weren't family. Yet they all looked familiar. Ronald and Nancy Reagan, Bob Hope, Roseanne Barr, and many of them were signed as if they were friends, which they probably were. To Phyllis, much love, Ronnie, aka the president, one picture on the wall said. Further roaming in the mansion revealed a room that looked like a cedar chest exploded. It was everything you might keep in a trunk at the foot of your bed, except it was on the walls. and on the floor, and on racks that went wall to wall. Wigs. And when I say wigs, there was probably a wig for every color of the rainbow, and then there were wigs that were also rainbow. And feathered boas. You could probably redress 1 million birds with accumulated feathers in that room. And dresses, upon dresses. Probably every dress that was ever worn on every stage she'd ever been on. Johnny Carson, Ed Sullivan. And you knew this because she had a picture stapled to the dress that she was wearing that you were looking. To this day, I don't know why that was. Maybe it was a way of jogging her memory. After all, when I knew her, she was about 85 years old. She really did have a room full of memories, and you were standing there right in it, practically tasting the color. Another thing about Phyllis Diller was she became an artist in her later years. She painted a lot of self-portraits, stick figures with huge 80s hair, like she'd used all the Aquanet ever produced to create the whole ozone layer. Maybe she needed the money because she was trying to sell her art right there from her hallway. I mean, you could see the price tag on her art. In this example, $10,000 lined out in red pen, like a teacher correcting your pop quiz, and written under it was a price maybe half of that. I felt like it was a bargain basement garage sale in a celebrity's home. When I went to another wing of her house, I noticed a large mahogany desk. Beautiful desk, but you could barely see the mahogany. Why? The desk had piles and piles of greeting cards. It looked like more cards than in the back room of a Hallmark store. And surrounding the cards were boxes with dividers sticking out. And the dividers said birthday, sympathy, get well, typical greeting card categories you'd find in a store. And it was curious. Did Phyllis Diller plan on opening her own Hallmark store as a side business in her living room? Or has she kept every card she ever received? So I asked, and I was told something fairly interesting. Yes, Ms. Diller did file every card she ever got, but it wasn't because she wanted to keep them. Even though she had money to literally burn like Scrooge McDuck, she had grown up during the Great Depression. So she would take each card and cut off the back part where someone had written something near and dear to her. And she would reuse the front of the card when it was someone's birthday or they got sick or someone passed away. She figured, why buy a new card when you could reuse a perfectly good one? Towards the end of the running around of the playground that was Phyllis Diller's house was the actual Phyllis Diller. They referred to her as the Phyllis Diller, as if she was some object. The assistant barked at people and warned us, there will be no touching of the Phyllis Diller. Don't shake her or touch her. Someone who was sick did that once years ago, and she believes she caught their cold and never got rid of it. Reminder, there will be no touching of the Phyllis Diller. Now, when I finally got to meet Phyllis Diller, it was in a dark room that reminded me of the mahogany desk and how dark the wood was. I guess she was trying to save electricity and that Great Depression way of thinking again. But you see, Phyllis Diller didn't need any artificial light from lamps or the bright lights from the many stages she performed on, television or otherwise. Her personality was enough to radiate through the entire mansion into every person. She did her signature laugh again when I told her the role that I remember her most for was, when she was on, Scooby-Doo. And her reply was, that was my favorite thing I did ever. I'm sure it wasn't her favorite thing she ever did, but that's the thing about stars. They shine so bright, even when they're artificial, they can make you feel, if only for a second, like the spotlight is on you. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.
I certainly experienced the light of Phyllis Diller in new ways. I loved hearing that screaming laugh. But the Scooby-Doo was woohoo. And with that, I would like to ask our timer, Norman Dow, did all of our speakers qualify to receive votes this evening?
Well, actually, I'm the timer tonight.
Oh,
Madam
excuse me, timer Jim Gold.
Yeah, Norman's doing the vote counting, so he's the one
That's
that
right.
got to send your votes in. They all qualified. Toastmaster Christian came in at 926. Carol Prahinsky at 7 minutes even, and Toastmaster Chris Holtz on the way to DTM 6:52. So
All right. So yes, I stand corrected. Our vote counter is Norman Dow. Please send your vote for best speaker to Norman Dow in the private chat. And now we move on to the second part of our luminous meeting. We're going to be lit up with great questions, we're hoping, by Topics Master David Carr. David, take it away.
Thank you, Elaine. Yes, and I did latch on to this word luminous as something to build table topics around. One of the first things it made me think of was Christmas lights, particularly those houses that you go by where every window is bracketed by Christmas lights. And all around the shutters of the house, usually there's inflatable lit up things in the yard and statues. And I'm just curious, when you drive by that, what do you think? Do you think how beautiful? Are you amused? Or do you think how tacky? Or what an incredible waste of energy? Chris Gold.
Yeah. Mr. Topic Master, Christmas lights, a joy or a denigration? It's both. You know, I have admitted several times lately to being a bah humbugger when it comes to Christmas. I was an only child, and once I turned to be a teenager, we didn't do the traditional tree and presents. We took a vacation at Christmas time. So to me, Christmas holidays is a holiday. It's not. But I do appreciate some beautiful lights. We live in a gated townhouse community in Fort Lauderdale, and we're in the back. So luckily, we don't have any responsibility for getting the holiday decorations out. But our neighbors up in the front do an awesome job. It is just beautiful. It does make me feel festive when we come into this community. The gates have all sorts of lights and even a little bit of Christmas music. I have been to that place. There's a house in Hollywood, Florida, that year after year is known for promoting the fact that they have all these lights timed to music and Santa in his sleigh going across the roof, and people come from miles around to travel down their street. I would think those neighbors would be pretty upset, actually. So Christmas spirit, sure, I'll take some of it. Just don't force me to do it myself. Mr. Topic Master.
Thank you, Chris. It also occurred to me that after, you talked about eggnog, after enough spiked eggnog or hard cider or other good things that we had to pass around the holidays, I can get pretty luminous myself. And so I'm curious, what is it that you find yourself doing a little bit too much of around the holidays? Tiger.
Thank you for that illuminating question. What do I find myself doing a little too much of? Well, I'll give you an example. I live in an older neighborhood on a golf course. And in the last 4 days, I've been visited by neighbors, all of whom brought tins, as in metal, of goodies. Chocolate cookies, chocolate covered caramel corn. Now there's a concept. Scones. This one woman brought scones, or 4 of them, so I'm thinking, well, that would be great. My next 4 mornings, I'm going to have scones. Well, I ate one today. It was so good, I ate another one. And that was so good, I ate a 3rd one. And I was thinking, no, I have to save the 4th one. I'm like, nah, screw it. I'm happy. I'm sugar high. I'm going for it. I ate all 4 scones, and I have been on a sugar high all day. So what have I been doing for the last couple of days? I have been eating goodies, not that I baked, but that were baked by my neighbors, and my diet, whatever that was, is absolutely gone. But I feel good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tiger. I also went digging around for a couple of quotes. These are all from Brainy Quote, the website where you can dig up lots of quotes. Oscar Wilde said, "Moderation is a fatal thing. Nothing succeeds like excess." Say a few words for me on behalf of excess. Joy. In defense of excess. Joy.
And excess doesn't mean too much. Exaggeration. Yeah.
Yeah, too much.
Yeah. I was thinking of this quote. It's really funny because I have a feeling that there are some people, these kind of narcissistic kinds of people, who are exaggerating a lot. And they seem to be very successful if they are in the right environment and get the right kind of position in their community. So there is something about it that if you have too much of confidence, see, from my point of view, it's too much because it is irritating. It can be a good recipe for succeeding whatever you want. But in everyday life and in my own communities, I prefer people who are modest and who are not, who don't want to have things in excess, or their behavior is not in excess. But what really bothers me about this country in general is that people tend to acquire too many things. And some of my friends, there are packages in front of their doors every day. I mean, they are all the time ordering things online. And most of these friends, they are single women. So I don't know what they are ordering, but something is coming all the time. And I very rarely see anything leaving their houses. But things are leaving at least some people's houses, because today, every Monday, I have been volunteering in a thrift store sorting donations, and we do get a lot of stuff. And a lot of this stuff we get, they even have price tags on them. So they have not been used. So it's some kind of probably there was a time in your history in this country that you were really encouraged to buy to keep the economical wheels rolling. And then some people have stuck in that kind of behavior. That's my input to this subject. Back to you, Mr.
Okay.
Topics Master.
All right, thank you, Joy. I tried to get a few words in favor of excess out of her, but I don't know. That's all right. She threw a good curve at it. This next quote is from Charles Dickens, and it is, "Happy, happy Christmas that can win us back to the delusions of our childhood days, recall to the old man the pleasures of youth, and transport the traveler back to his own fireside and quiet home." Where will you be transported on Christmas, Norman Dow?
Thank you, Mr. Table Topic Master. Yeah, the transport is back to a place that was very simple. When I was very young, I lived 35 miles from New York City without any electricity, without any of the modern conveniences of plumbing or whatever. I recall my grandfather had bought the house for $1,200, and the power company said there's $1,000 to run power. So we were a very rudimentary, but we enjoyed ourselves. I learned how to read because I couldn't watch any TV. There was no TV. And I played with my sister, and I read, and I ran through the woods. So I go back, transported to a very simple place, which had a profound effect on my life. That's where that comes to mind in the transport back to another place on Christmas Day. Thank you, Mr. Table Topic Master.
All right. Based on the time, perhaps we should call that enough for today. Timer, can we have a report on how our contestants did? You can post it to the chat, but was anybody disqualified?
Okay, sorry about that. I'm struggling. Yeah, I'll post it to the chat. They all qualify. Chris Gould, 145. Tiger, 125. Joy, 222. And Norman, 101. They all qualify. And Norman is your vote counter, so be careful. Watch it.
All right.
Whatever you are. Topics master.
Back to you, Toastmaster of the day.
We are now at the time of our meeting where I turn things over to our general evaluator, Graham Cairns. Graham, over to you.
Ho, 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 Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests. I'm going to be the Grinch. No, I'm not actually going to be Grinchy on a meeting like this. It's been absolutely marvellous. I've really enjoyed the meeting so far, and I will give some observations about that a little later. But before we do, it's time for the evaluations of our formal speeches tonight. We had, as you know, 3 great speeches. I think I can say that without stepping on the toes of the evaluators. But to find out how they were great and how they can be even greater, let's introduce our evaluators. The evaluator of our first speech tonight is Antoinette Trim. Now, Antoinette has mostly in this club been doing speeches rather than evaluations, but after last meeting said she wanted to step up and do more evaluations to get more involved in the online participation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for a time of 2 to 3 minutes with lights at 2, 2.5, and 3, please, with the timekeeper, Antoinette Trim.
Thank you, General Evaluator. I was pleased to evaluate Christian of Mauritius. I found that his opening sentence was really interesting with a date, 1968, relative to storytelling. In the Caribbean, we don't really give dates to these things. We just tell the story. So it was unusual to me to hear from a storyteller of the date of the story. And also, I liked how he spoke in a sultry voice, especially when he was talking about the sad parts of the story. And also, I liked his contrast, the use of contrast, where he said, pleasure in the day, in the night, and looming with fright. I found that was an interesting contrast. However, maybe Christian, we can have more vocal variety in terms of loudness and softness. Men fell asleep was, when he made the statement, men fell asleep, it was soft. But I found that, for instance, when he made the statement, call of a Mother Nature, maybe he could have made it a little louder so it will alarm most of us. All in all, it was an interesting story. To me, it seemed to be very truthful because of the experiences that he portrayed. Or to me, it sounded very like it really happened. And I love his various emotions, which displayed, and his choice of words. And I just want to encourage Christian to continue with his storytelling act. And I guess he may be able to write Enid Blyton. Those of us who know about Enid Blyton as a famous storyteller, especially for the girls or the famous 5. Those of us who read those books. Back to you,
Thank you.
Evaluator.
Thank you, Antoinette, for the evaluation. Our second evaluator tonight is an experienced evaluator, and I'm really, really pleased to see that he is going to be doing this evaluation and not me, because this would be a tough speech to evaluate for a variety of reasons, which he will no doubt explain. Ladies and gentlemen, your evaluator for speech 2, the monodrama, Jim Barber.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator, my fellow Toastmasters, and especially Toastmaster and International Director Carol Prahinsky. Carol, you are still working on the interpretive reading manual, which I love, and I'm glad that you're doing it, and especially this project, the monodrama. This provided you with an opportunity to really do some impressive things, and you did it. You knocked it out of the park. There were two things that I especially liked about what you did tonight. One of them, I originally wrote it as vocal variety, but Antoinette was talking about contrast, and I said, oh, that's the word that I need to use. You went beyond vocal variety to vocal contrasts. Your voice went from not just volume, in terms of volume going from whispering to loud. That's, a lot of people do that. But you went from emphatic to whimsical. You went from fast to slow. You used the different contrasts in the way that you were saying things to support what you were saying. It worked so very well. The second thing that I want to compliment you on is your use of gestures. Many people use gestures effectively, and they use them to inform. You'll hold up the two fingers to indicate number 2 or something like that. But you go beyond that. You'll need to go back and look at the video to see what I'm talking about, the replay. But your gestures go beyond informative. They are expressive. I couldn't begin to imitate what you do, but your finger movements when you're describing something, you're interpreting what you're reading, not just with your voice, but with your hand motions. That is so well done. I have only one suggestion for you, and it really doesn't have anything to do with interpretive reading, but it's a video thing. Your background consists of vertical stripes. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, except that every movement that you make is exaggerated. A normal side-to-side movement of just an inch or something like that normally wouldn't show up, but with the vertical stripes, it does. So either don't move at all, which I would not be my preference. You would look a little rigid, and I like the way you move around. So the other thing is to get a more free-form background or a blank background, and either one, that would work great. But this was a wonderful monodrama. I'm really looking forward to seeing what else you're going to do with this manual. And I've got one last thing I need to do before I leave, and that's to use the word of the day, Mr. Luminous General Evaluator.
Thank you, Jim, for illuminating us all with your evaluation there, and I thank you for that. Our third evaluator tonight is going to be Lewis Brown. And Lou was saying before that he was in the dark. Well, now he is completely in the dark because he's lost his video, but he can still hear us. And I'm hoping that we will be able to hear him. So, Lou, don't bother about your video, but can you at least try talking to us?
I can, Mr. General Evaluator. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Excellent.
Awesome. Thank you. I do apologize. My system needs an upgrade. Unfortunately, bad timing. Chris, excellent speech. Number 34. That is awesome. The entertaining speech. Let's start off with the obvious, your humor. I noted so many great lines that you had from the speech that were funny, funny, funny. La La Land stands for L.A. The laugh bite, of course, that you played for us with Phyllis's unique laugh. You pointed out her interesting art, which I gotta tell you, there's so many folks that think they're artists, but you know, end of the day, they really aren't. Her mansion looking like a garage sale, reusing greeting cards. It's so interesting when folks who are filthy rich tend to reuse things in that manner, but you know what? That's how it goes. Her house being like a playground, and of course, she wanting to be referred to as the Phyllis Diller, and of course her hypochondria as well. Well, you had a good lead-in on these particular humorous elements, kind of leading up to the punchline. I would have been more entertained had you used a bit of a more dramatic delivery with certain punchlines. For example, when you talked about Phyllis's look and the colorful objects that you were about to show us, which were her wigs. Great pause leading up to that. Although again, I would have been more entertained if you said something like wigs. Well, can you believe it? Something a little bit more dramatic to kind of highlight that punchline. Second, great use of diverse media. Oh my goodness, I noticed in the evaluation form that is one of the items in having various forms of media. Great use of the sound, of the pictures. They were simple yet very descriptive. You also had very good handle on the screen sharing efforts, which, as I'm sure everyone would agree, can be a bit of a challenge. There was a bit of a delay leading up to the soundbite, but in my opinion, it was not major at all. You really worked the screen sharing mechanism very well. Allow me to talk about speech organization. I like how you packaged the speech. You led off with "once upon a time," so we immediately knew we were in for a great story. I did find the ending to be a bit abrupt, and I have to admit, I could not tell where the body of the speech ended and the conclusion started, aside from ending with the line that you chose. Here are a few options that you may want to consider. Since this is a story, perhaps you can come up with a moral to the story. I have to admit, I don't have one offhand, but there's something that usually most stories include. Or you could end with the end and make kind of like bookends for your story. You started off with "once upon a time," you could end with "the end." This was an entertaining speech, so I was very observant of the crowd to see if everyone was entertained. I saw lots of smiles right from the beginning, and I did observe that folks were keenly observant. I especially like the double entendre, by the way, associated with your title, "An Artificial Light from a Star." Very nice job with that title. Please keep us entertained, and I do look forward to speech number 35, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Mr. Evaluator Lou, in the dark there. Now, can I ask our timekeeper, how did our evaluators go? They were all given 2 to 3 minutes.
Sorry about that. Absolutely, they all qualify. Toastmaster Antoinette, 227, Toastmaster Jim B, 252, and Toastmaster Lou, even though we couldn't see him, 312. They all qualify. Send your votes into Norman.
Fabulous. If you can do that, that will then allow Norman to collate the results and announce them before we are finished this evening. Let's move on to our grammarian. And can I get from you, Tiger, your observations on grammar and stuffs tonight?
Thank you, sir, for that wonderful introduction. I did not catch any egregious uses of the language. However, I did catch many simple uses of language that enhance people's speeches. Lou, you are, I could have said a dozen things. There are 2 things that struck me. Funny, funny, funny. It struck me as being very funny. And also keenly observant. Antoinette, an interesting contrast. Joy, excuse me, I'm reading my notes here. Oh, acquire many things. It kind of tells the story, doesn't it? They acquire too many things. Chris said the word festive. I like that word, especially this time of year. David used the terminology latched onto the term of the day. I kind of like that. Jim Barber used intellectual property. Jim, our timer, used very simple terminology. He said, "I'm going to flash the green and the yellow," which I find that to be very flashy. Joy used the term unnecessary utterances. I love that. Oh, I'm going to be curious what she comes up with that. Christian said his heart was raging, his mind was frozen. That was very descriptive. Carol, it wasn't what you said so much as how you said it. It was River gave back a waterlogged corpse, and the way you did your hand gestures, I think Jim alluded to that. It was just very, very well done. And finally, Chris, her signature laugh. Great, great use of the language, you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tiger. Fair enough, too. I'm not quite sure what that was, but Cool. All right, thank you very much for that, Mr. Grammarian. Now, our watcher tonight, as well as having a second role, was Chris Gould. And Chris, you were the chat monitor and the watcher. Can you tell us how our chat went, how we looked?
Okay. As for the chat, there wasn't a whole lot of activity in chat today. We didn't get into any side discussions. It was used primarily for very pragmatic purposes, which is very useful in these online. We talked about the timing requirements and the timing and whether or not a update should be done to a computer in the middle of in the middle of a meeting. And that was about it. Like I say, just a very pragmatic chat. As far as how people looked, I look for kind of 5 things. Lighting, and this is a professional group. You are all very luminous. Your lighting was good. You can tell that everybody on this meeting has had practice with that. So lighting and position of your face and your background, whether or not your video is clear. And I'll talk more about that. And then whether your background, and number one, what I really want to focus on, is eye contact. Because eye contact is so different in the online. And let me see, I did notice, I thought Christian did a good job with eye contact, Jim Barber, Jim Gould, and Joy. And Graham, you are right now. you were right. But most of the time, most everybody was looking down. And that is because if you're looking at our eyes, they're down. But no, you have to look at the camera. And some of us have more than one camera. How do you know which one is active? You put your finger over it and see that your video goes away. And while you're doing that, you may as well, oh, my background doesn't go away though, because of the green screen stuff. You might as well take a little cloth and clean it as well. A clean lens makes all the difference in a clear video. So clean the lens, and at least every once in a while, look right at that lens rather than down at the people. Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Chris, for that specific piece of advice. And that's always something that we should look for in an evaluation, something specific. Now, our R counter was... Did we have an R counter specifically? That would be Joy, whose name says the R counter, Joy. I should learn to read. Maybe I should look down there occasionally. Joy, your report, please.
Yeah, this was such a difficult job in this professional club because I didn't hear any unnecessary utterances and no repetitive use of these basically and and whatever people can say in normal conversations. There were several people who used the word of the day, luminous, like David Carr, Jim Barber, Graham, Griscald, and probably several others when I was concentrating on the subject and chasing the unnecessary utterances. Back to you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you very much for that. Now, just one last reminder to send your votes to our vote counter, Norman. I'll be calling upon Norman to give us the results unless he has them all already. Nope. All right. I'll be calling on him after I give a general evaluation. First up, let me say that we had a fairly small meeting. In fact, 13, 14 members is fairly small for this club, although I should tell you also that 13 or 14 members would be an absolute plethora for a number of clubs that I belong to. If you get more than 6, then you're doing well. So it was a small but enthusiastic group, and I thank everybody for your participation tonight. Our Toastmaster of the night, Elaine. One of the things I really liked about Elaine's role as Toastmaster is that she was responding to each of the participants. In Pathways, there's a level 3 elective, which is normally used with the Table Topics Master, but which could be used tonight for Elaine's Toastmaster role. That is an active listening module where the participant listens to the responses and uses that to feed the rest of the group. And I commend Elaine on doing that tonight. The topics tonight had good topical choice, David. I commend you on those. Chris, one of the things I would say, Chris Gould, repeating gives you time to think about it, but so does pausing. And if you don't repeat the topic, if you just pause for a couple of seconds, think about what it is you're going to say, and then say it, it gives you authority, which you lose by repeating the topic. Tigers spoke about the vocal variety and had great vocal variety and a lovely lilting in his voice. One of the things I liked about that is that he was excited and he shared that excitement with us, and his vocal variety allows us to share it and therefore take on what it is that he is saying so well. Joy, thoughtful. She went from the specific to the general and then back to the specific again in her evaluation, in her table topic, which I thought was particularly good. I would try to think of a way to make your message resonate with all of us by saying, in this country, you, in this country, you, in this country, you actually created a barrier between those that were in that country and you. Didn't cause such a problem for me because I'm halfway between, almost quite literally. But so try not to create barriers between yourself and the audience. Say, I've observed that in this country, we become one of us for the purpose of your table topic. Evaluations. Now, before I get to the evaluations, then I'll just give a very brief point to each of the evaluators. I want to talk about the function and the best way to evaluate. I believe that when we evaluate, we should not only tell people what they have done or what they can improve, why they have, how they've done it and how they can improve, but most importantly, why they should do it to improve, particularly if you're talking for improvement. So let's take a look at the three evaluations that we've got here. The vocal variety that was mentioned by Antoinette was really good. She spoke about how Christian had raised and lowered his voice, how he'd got faster, but she didn't say why it is important to use that vocal variety. That, what was the word that you used? Contrast. Jim, on the other hand, spoke about the use of the background and how it would have been better if that were blank, and then said why that was important so that it doesn't draw our eye away because of those three lines. So that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about when I'm saying talk about what to do, talk about how to do it, but talk about why. Lou Brown, for example, spoke about the use of visuals versus vocals. He didn't actually talk about why it was important that we did that, but he did draw our attention to a way that Chris could have made his speech even better by using a bookend. And he only referred to that. Had he then spoken about why that bookending makes it a more coherent whole for us, that would have just added just a little bit more to Lou's presentation. Look, I thought that they were all good evaluations. I thought that it was a really good meeting. I am now about 2 minutes over where I'm supposed to be, and I can see a timekeeping device wandering over Jim's face. So I will call upon our vote counter to announce the results of tonight's vote. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Norman Dow.
Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator. The best speaker this evening was Christopher. The best table topic master was myself. And the best evaluator was Lou Brown. Thank you, Mr. General Evaluator.
Congratulations to all of those who won. Congratulations to everybody who participated. As I say, I've had a fabulous time as General Evaluator. I will now hand control back to the Toastmaster of the evening, who can then hand back to our Presiding Officer. Elaine.
Thank you so much, Graham, for that great coverage of the evening with your fine comments. I learned so much from you and really from everyone here. And just to kind of reiterate the theme for today, which was treasures of the holiday, I want to say how much I treasure what I've learned from this group, what I learn every week. It's such a civil place to be in a time where there's just so much chaos happening in the world and many arenas of the media. So I'm very appreciative to be here, to grow in skills that help people connect, collaborate, and communicate to help make our world a better place and help us let our own luminous gifts come out more easily to the world. With that, I would like to pass things back over to David Carr, presiding officer. Could you tell us a little bit about the speechathon that is coming up?
There's a speechathon. It's coming up. It's on Saturday. It's at 1 p.m. I don't know much more about it than that, but it is an opportunity for you, an extra opportunity if you are at ends this weekend and are able to attend. Please do. Maybe I'll even show up.
Thank you. I do know that the start time for it is 1 p.m. Eastern, and there is a time and date converter, I believe, on the website that explains that to make it easier for people to determine whether they can participate. One of the speakers for the event, is our counter for the day, Joy, and is going to be doing a debate, a different kind of event, if I am recalling. So I look forward to that.
It does look like they need a timer, they need a couple of evaluators.
Joy would like to speak. Joy?
Go ahead,
Yes.
Joy.
I would like to ask Chris, Scout, Christopher House, and Norman. I have sent you a couple of emails asking whether you would like to be in my panel. The theme is retirement planning, not the financial one, but from emotional point of view. And I would really love to get a response so that if you three cannot be there, so that I still have time to find some other people to be there.
I actually can't.
Norman, Christopher, and Chris.
Plans.
Okay. What about Norman and Chris Scout?
And I'm sorry I missed your email. I'll have to look at my calendar. I'm not sure, but I'll find your email and make sure to respond.
Good.
I have family visiting, so I don't know that I'll be able to make it.
Okay, then I will check some other people. Good.
Well, this group has a lot of merry, helpful elves. So let's send the vibes out into the group, magnetize the right people to come forth, and hold the vision that things will work out swimmingly. There will be plenty of light there on that day. And with that, is there anyone else that has an announcement to make this evening? If not, we can wind up the recorded part of our program. It's just coming up on 9 o'clock. I'd like to thank everybody for gathering together during this very, very busy season to experience the treasure of each other and this club, feel into all the riches of this holiday season, and extend our love and good wishes to all.